USA. Today's topic, our first ever Wacky Wednesday. You're joining me, your host, Ryan Worth, along with our producer, Charlotte, and lead correspondent, Mark Wilson. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Good to see you.
I'm feeling wacky, ready to go.
You guys have some good stories, I know. Let's get into it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, before we do that, we got to talk about the channel.
All right. We have our producer. I'm Charlotte Pierce, our senior correspondent. I've elevated Ryan this week to a senior correspondent.
Wow.
Mark Wilson. Mark Wilson is our senior correspondent as well. And then we have Allison Polini, Tara Morgan, Reba Knickerbocker of Bend the Blade, and the wonderful Veronica Platzer out in Boulder. So we welcome you to another exciting episode of the Ready Row USA podcast as we continue regular broadcasts featuring the best of rowing news. We do interviews, we cover gadgets and gear from clubs, companies, and rowers across the country. The Ready Row USA is a part of the International Rowing Chat Network. So it's rowing.chat. You can subscribe to receive notifications of upcoming shows. We always welcome news tips from rowing clubs and individuals. And you can join our community by visiting the website. And all the links are in the show notes. If you're listening on a podcast app, there will be show notes and you can find out how to contact us. We'd love to have your involvement. Our live viewers are very much appreciated. We are on YouTube live every Wednesday, except if there's some kind of technical issue or a holiday. We'll try and get to as many of your questions and comments as possible. So those of you who are listening and watching later, thank you so much for listening. And again, you can always send in a question or comment and contact us via rowing.chat. But first, we have a word about our fabulous sponsors, who make it possible for us to put on this podcast and bring you the news.
Yes, and our first sponsor is Inspired. The clever engineers at Inspired make it easy for you to video your crew. Their design is a tripod with suction cup feet that mount anywhere on the bow or stern deck of your boat. You can check them out at rowing.chat/sponsors/or-inspired. And our other sponsor is Randall Oarfoil. The Randall Oarfoils it's an ingenious way to avoid digging too deep on the drive. They're a glue-on attachment for sweep or sculling oars. They help keep your oar at the right level, just under the surface. Randall Oar can increase your effectiveness. You can special order at rowing.chat/sponsors. And now we're headed into the episode. Mark, tell us about one of the wackiest trophies that you've seen in the rowing world.
Well, I think thanks for inviting me again, Charlotte and Ryan, and I appreciate being here on this beautiful Wacky Wednesday. I think one of the interesting things with regattas is the fact that a lot of people want a medal, right? Everybody wants a medal, but I think some of these other regattas and events that come up with interesting trophies that then end up at the boathouse or on the wall at the boathouse are really great. So one of the most famous here is the Head of the Fish up in Saratoga, New York, started by our friend Chris Chase. And, it's just a great thing. The kids people actually catch the fish throughout the year, and then they try to dry them as best they can. And then the kids come down and paint them into all these goofy colors, and they put googly eyes on them and stuff. And it's a great thing to hang up at the boathouse, and everybody's always excited about it. Another great one was just last weekend up in Putney, Vermont, and that's the Green Mountain Head. And obviously the winners there get a really useful award, which is a batch of Vermont maple syrup. So what's wrong with that? Nothing. Right. And second place, I think, gets apple cider. So that's just almost as good as apple syrup. Or maple syrup. So great things out there. I've put on events too. We did an event in Bloomington, Indiana, which was called the Lemonhead way back when I was coaching in Indiana. And I had the athletes on my team paint up plates. And the plates, they took them to a paint your own pottery place, and we had our logo, and every plate for all the different award classes were different. And I still see some of those plates hanging up in boathouses around the Midwest. So it's really great to see the longevity of those kind of awards, like the fish, and so on, that end up getting actually displayed rather than just put into a shoebox. So if you're putting on a regatta, if you're starting a new event, think about how you might want to spice up your awards and things to make it a little bit more unique, that you will certainly get discussion points on that.
Absolutely. And I bet those ceramic plates from the Lemon Head have a little bit better longevity than Head of the Fish trophies. There's been some good stories about some partially taxidermied trophies out of that regatta.
You're absolutely right, Ryan. I have known coaches that they've been sitting in their office and they've got the trophy up on the wall, and then all of a sudden a part of a fish head, maybe the chin, maybe the lower jaw, starts to kind of ooze down, and then maybe an eye socket kind of just starts to dissolve. Yeah, there's all sorts of great stories out there.
Well, and head racing itself lends itself to that kind of festival or carnival more feel than I think our sprint racing does. You mentioned earlier the Head of the Rivanna regatta and some of the special stuff that happens there. What's that?
The Head of the Rivanna there in Charlottesville, Virginia, they've got a pretty cool thing going on. They work with a hot air balloon group, and they have hot air balloons that are flying right over the race course, at least part of the time. Obviously, hot air balloons can kind of do their own thing, but it's pretty cool on a nice calm fall day to be rowing along, and then all of a sudden have a fleet of hot air balloons going over your head. So always great things. So it is unique. I think the thing that people like is that festival atmosphere. You're usually on the venue for a good long time during the day. Obviously, you might be rowing multiple events, but if you're not, then having some other things to do is really a good thing. So lots of interesting things out there. We'd love to have our viewers or listeners, share some of their favorite head race antics as you go along. So feel free to chime in and let us know what some of your favorite ones are.
Well, that seems to be kind of the theme of today's episode is collections of good stories. And you recently, just last week, had a really good one, didn't you, Mark?
Well, it really was. It was a tremendous opportunity. I was doing a camp up at the La Baie Verte Rowing Club in Green Bay this past summer, and Martin Syncopated happens to be, if you can believe it, he's obviously a world champion, been rowing for about 12 years, maybe, I think, or maybe 15. He was just in Green Bay. He happens to be a huge Green Bay Packer fan, and that kind of came into the discussion, and we helped arrange to get him to a couple of games up in Green Bay. And I have to tell you, he's just such an absolute gentleman. The week that he was there, almost a week, he got to go to a Sunday night game with a bunch of the fans there. You can see in the pictures, if you're watching live, some of the fans there supporting Martin. And then he also got to go to the Thursday night game against the Eagles last week, and I got to go up on Wednesday. And then he was so generous with his time. He rode in a double with one of the members. He rode in a mixed four with some of the members, which I'm sure is a little different than rowing with his brother in the pair. And he rode in a quad with myself and a couple other members. So it was really a fantastic opportunity. And he is absolute gentleman, I have to say. You're never sure what kind of a person it is who gets into a boat for as many hours in a week as it takes to become a world champion. But he is an absolute fantastic guy, very articulate, spoke very good English, and was able to answer questions. They had 2 open houses while he was in Green Bay. One was with the St. Norbert's rowing club, which is the local college there in town. And the kids came out and were sitting just around these picnic tables and chatting with him and asking him questions. And one of the students was great. One of the St. Norbert students, she's actually teaching as well, elementary school. So she had her elementary school 5-6-year-olds write down questions to ask Martin. And one of them was, what's your favorite number? Like, right? It's like, what is his favorite number? Can you guess, Ryan?
Is it 2?
It's 1. He wants to be first, so it's the one. And another question was, do you like carrots? And he said, yes, I like carrots. And then everybody laughed because I think the person asking the question probably didn't want him to say yes, but he does like his carrots. And it was just great. It was just a fun opportunity. And he reached out to the club. So one of the things that you really do want to make sure of, and I think I might have mentioned this before, is you do want to have that contact us button on your website if you're a rowing club, and you actually want to read it. So make sure you pay attention to that, to those opportunities. But I want to give all the kudos and cred to Martin and his wife for coming up and spending some time in Green Bay. And I'm sure he won't be the last time he comes to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Great. That sounds great. Speaking of asking people questions, we've got one from the viewers real quick. How do experienced coxswains really hit the bridges at the head of the Charles? You want to take that one, Mark?
Well, I have seen a lot of people hit bridges at the head of the Charles, and really what the issue is the speed. And as some of those corners, they actually kind of appear one way, but then they kind of accelerate. So, the famous one, which always gets a lot of views, is the Elliott Bridge as you're coming in past the Cambridge Boat Club. So that one gets, you're coming along a corner and it's fairly, it's a long corner. And then all of a sudden it kind of accelerates or tightens in as you're coming into the bridge. So yeah, we've seen plenty of people hit that bridge, or, the coxswain standby go-to move is to stick that left arm down into the water and try to accelerate the turn on that side of the boat. But it happens.
It does happen. The famous Peking University 8 managing to sink. That wasn't because they struck the bridge. It was from another boat. But
that's right.
Yeah. All right. So moving on here with our Wacky Wednesday, we're almost halfway through the episode already. So let me just prime this next thing that we've got on deck, which is taking things a little bit offshore and transatlantic, Pacific, whatever ocean it may be, but ocean rowing. And
why would anybody want to do that, right?
That's a good question. And Mark and Charlotte know this, but I did row across the Atlantic back in 2011 with a crew of 15 others. If you're viewing on YouTube, you'll be able to catch a picture of that boat. It was big blue. And you can see I did say what a stupid idea. You got 8 rowing stations. You got 8 bunks. You got 16 people. You've got what you need to survive on a boat. There is no support vessel. But ocean rowing is kind of wacky. And it shares a lot of traits with mountaineering. Edmund Hillary, one of the first people to summit Mount Everest, was asked why he was doing it. And he said, because it is there. And
that's right.
I think
the only difference between mountaineering, Ryan, and ocean crossings is that you can always, your feet are on the ground. So, and you're not typically 2,000 miles away from, what do we call it?
Anything.
Land.
Yeah.
Land.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a few differences there.
There are some big differences, but one of the appeals, and as a mountaineer myself, and I know Mark, you've done some climbing too, but one of those appeals there is similar to the sport of rowing itself, but being 1,000 miles from absolutely anything else and knowing that, and you and the people on your boat are the only other people there, that's an experience that very few people get. And that's actually what attracted me to ocean rowing as a high school rower, as I saw the statistic that more people had been to outer space than had ever rowed across an ocean. And that statistic is actually still true.
Wow.
Ocean rowing is gaining popularity, but was it Russia just put a couple cosmonauts up into orbit the other day, headed to the space station. So people are still heading to space. People are still rowing across oceans. And going to our next slide here, that's going to take us into something else pretty wacky. So those of you viewing at home are going to be able to watch this, and Mark and I are just going to discuss a little bit about syncopated rowing. I think it hasn't really been present in the last couple decades, but through the 20s and 30s and all the way up into the 80s, there were people messing around with figuring out how to reduce the check of a boat. And so there's a lot of different stuff with equipment. Ocean rowing deserves its own episode. Equipment deserves its own episode. And the syncopated rowing, the style or the theory there was that any one pair of rowers in an 8, say, would be taking different parts of the stroke at different times. So you always had someone at the front end of the drive, you always had a pair at the back end of the drive, you always had a pair starting their recovery, and you always had a pair approaching the catch. So in an 8. So that was kind of novel, and you can imagine that could be effective, executed well. The boats were not known for getting off the start very well. Anyhow, Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're trying to watch the video, but it's seemingly not loading 100%. But the idea is exactly as Ryan explains. The idea is to keep the power impulse constant throughout the whole race or the whole event. So the idea of not having a dedicated gliding portion or recovery, but always being under some sort of power. Obviously, the problem is that power is dissipated by the factions of the number of people that you're having row or not row. So the power output is going to be less at any given time, but it's constant. So that was the whole idea. Here comes the video. If you have, whoops.
Yeah. You can Google it on YouTube.
You can Google it, right? But it is a very interesting thing. So
yeah, and I think probably one of the most recent times when syncopated rowing was seen was the '79 World Championships, where the Soviet women's coxed 4 actually had a coxswain in the middle of the boat. And so that space between rowers, as you can imagine in a sweep boat, you can't just not be taking a stroke when the person in front of you is. And they stuck the coxswain in the middle of the 2 pairs. Which that in itself, even if you weren't rowing in a syncopated style, would be pretty interesting. You've got a bow pair being looked at as if they're in a stern loader, and a stern pair with the coxswain behind them as if they're in a bow loader. We do have an image of that on the next slide. But
I think this is pretty amazing, and it really is basically a straight 4 with the coxswain in the middle. So I don't even know if the coxswain had steering mechanisms. Do you, Ryan? Do you know if that
actually did? Dr. Anderson, I don't believe he's actually a doctor, but Dr. Rowing, Mr. Anderson, he had an article in, I want to say it was like the 1997 Rowing News magazine, where he actually discussed that boat and remembering their race and winning the gold medal at the World Championships rowing a syncopated style at Bled.
Huh.
So
very cool.
One thing that we didn't cue to talk about on the show, but I was mulling over this morning, was the sliding rigger, right? And you kind of saw a little bit of the sliding rigger, I guess the tail end of it as you started rowing. Is that about right, Mark? Or?
Yeah, it was out there, and I've certainly seen people using it, and now we're kind of coming back into that with some of the oarboard developments and some of the other things that are coming back into vogue. The sliding rigger obviously was to keep your body weight in the middle of the boat, so you reduce check on either side, so it made the boat trim and row much more level through the water. And it was deemed to be a superior development, and then therefore it became banned because of potential cost and the idea that the technology was going to put it out of reach of some of the developing countries and developing players in the World League. So it was basically banned in the early 80s or mid 80s and so on. But I think that kind of goes right into what I'm holding in my hand right now. If we can get a little screenshot of that. This is a brass. This is a fully brass little item here. And if anybody has seen older rowing items, this is an actual wheel set from probably the turn of the century, but because it is full brass, and very similar concept to what Hudson came out with a few years ago with the USP wheel and track, which allowed it not to be sitting in a track which our normal wheels do, which can cause clog and so on. But this sat on a rail more or less and rolled back and forth instead of inside of a track like our normal wheels do. So kind of interesting little tidbit. What is old becomes new again.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's exactly right. In ocean rowing, you see tons of different stuff. People will just use rollerblade wheels for the seats. You've got a lot more pitch and roll, and the seats take more wear, and so you have to make those systems more robust. But I think
and you're going 3,000 miles.
And you are doing 3,000 miles. What the very first people to ever row across an ocean, no sail, no motor, that was 1896. Samuelson and Harbaugh, they were a couple oyster or clammers from up in New Jersey. And so they spent every day, all day out in a rowboat. And this is kind of, this was the age of exploration. The Arctic and Antarctic expeditions were going on around this time. And every now and then you would see an explorer become famous. And they more or less kind of said, well, maybe if we row across the ocean, we can be famous too. And their boat, the Fox, was just cedar. It had watertight compartments, bow and stern, but they were small, and they actually just had a canvas deck for sleeping under. They carried eggs, tea. They had a candlelit compass, a sailor's almanac, a sextant, and a pocket watch. And if any one of those single items were to be lost, they would have lost their capacity to navigate. And they're rowing they're rowing right out of Brooklyn, and they're headed to the Isles of Sicily. I want to say Sicily, but no, we're talking about the Isles of Scilly, which are off the coast of Great Britain. And, it was 114 years before anyone managed to row across the North Atlantic faster than those two guys did on their fixed seat cedar rowboat.
Crazy.
55 days. And so
how long did it take you, Ryan?
What's that?
How long did it take you?
It took us 48. And it is very weather dependent. Yeah. So, I went the more southern route. So from Africa, we launched in Morocco. A lot of people launched from the Canary Islands, and rowing across to one of the southern Caribbean. We landed in Barbados. That's a pretty common place. Some people will go to Antigua. The record for that crossing is sitting at 31 days and some change. And a similar crossing distance, which is being raced modern day, is the Pacific from California to Hawaii. And that's the same route that the Transpac sailing race travels. And you're seeing similar race times. It's about 3,000 miles on either of those courses. The North Atlantic, though, we got to give a shout out to one of our U.S. coaching, cohorts, is Bryce Carlson, who crossed from St. John's up in Newfoundland to the Sicily Isles. It only took him 38 days and a little over 6 hours. So he smashed the North Atlantic crossing record. He did it solo. Bryce is a teacher and a coach who lives in Cincinnati now. He spent some time in Atlanta. He's got a massive endurance, particularly endurance running, ultra running resume. I think he's done nearly 150 ultra marathons. So marathons of at least 26 miles or more, but a lot of them over 100 miles in a single continuous push. So Bryce had the mindset and the rowing background to be successful at this. And for those that are getting to watch on YouTube, got a couple clips from those two boats, the Fox and then Lucille, which was Bryce's boat. The jump from flat water rowing into open water rowing with your Moss and some of those other open water products, and then into coastal, which is definitely an up and coming sport with its looming inclusion into the Olympics. But ocean rowing has been around out of necessity for a long time, and now it's becoming more sport. The boats are foam core, solid carbon. I think Bryce's boat, bare bones, probably only weighed about 300 or 400 pounds. And that includes the sleeping cabin areas for the batteries, solar panels, water desalinator, and everything needed to be totally self-sufficient at sea.
Cool.
It is cool stuff. Let's see. We actually have a question that's a great segue here. Cue that up. Is it really possible to do a standing launch from the dock in a single?
Of course it is.
Of course
it's called a standing shove. People do it all the time.
It is. Yep. And
A lot of people probably back again when I kind of started rowing, which was not that long ago. A lot of people would say you're not really a single sculler until you do this daily. This is the way you always launch this, and the standing shove is how we always launched in our eights when I rode in college, and you do see it less now, which is kind of interesting. I think a lot of times people are just sitting in and doing their little thing, and then they get yelled at because they're spending too much time on the dock. But if you want to get off the dock quickly, the best way to do it is certainly do the standing shove in any boat class. So
yeah,
certainly doable.
Right, and worth practicing while we still have some warmer weather. I know up north we're starting to see those hints of fall finally coming in here October 2nd, but
yeah, not here in Florida. I rode yesterday. I did about a 15K row, and I lost 6 pounds, legit 6 pounds of sweat yesterday morning. So if you're coming to Florida, don't wait a little while. Wait a little while.
More months. We got a comment from a viewer, report of seeing a 57 Chevy on top of a houseboat while rowing on the Amstel River. The Amstel River, where is that, Mark?
The Amstel is in Amsterdam, I'm pretty sure, Ryan, where the Amstel Brewery might be as well. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, you do see some interesting things out there on the waterways. I think all around the world, wherever you travel, whether or not you're in Europe or South America or Asia, whatever, you're going to see interesting things, and it just brings you back to what rowing really gets its foundation from. Rowing is a working man's sport. It's a journeyman's occupation. It's transportation, and that's where our history really began. Is moving things across the water. So when you're moving, around the world, seeing things, go to these places, go and check things out. You'll be amazed to see what's moving out there along the waterways. So,
yes, yesterday.
Right. Yes.
The Nina, Columbus's ship, went by me in my junior's practice yesterday, heading down the Tennessee River. I'm going to spend some time in downtown Chattanooga. Sorry, I didn't get an image uploaded. This is pretty janky for those of you on YouTube. But the Nina and the Pinta, scale model replicas of Christopher Columbus's ships, passing during practice. And there's just sometimes when I don't have the heart to yell at these athletes and say, keep your head in the boat.
Good idea.
Getting passed by a 16th century model sailing vessel that's under motor.
Crazy. Hey, Ryan, we're wrapping up time here. We've had so much fun here on Wacky Wednesday. And again, as Ryan said earlier, a lot of our episodes could really be, or parts of our episodes could really be full episodes. So we apologize to you guys out there if we feel like we're rambling a little bit, but there really is a lot of great stuff in the sport of rowing. So today's episode hashtag is hashtag RRUSA Wacky, WACKY. So if you happen to put that out on your social media, who knows, maybe you'll win something.
That's right. Social media, what a powerful tool. The Rowing Club News Forum that we've got going, it's a great place to send in your news, accomplishments, or just questions. We're modeling this show to try to discuss and answer what you guys want to hear. So let us know what that is.
Absolutely. We know what we want to hear, but we want to know what you want to hear. So please send us information and any questions or potential show topics. We want to hear them from you. So,
yeah, absolutely. And then from the gadgets and gear standpoint, there's so many hacks that have been come up with over the years by different people. It really is tough in our sport, along with many, to actually have a unique idea. Because even once you think that you've got it, someone else probably has already done that thing. And we have a...
You know what, Ryan?
What's that?
There was once an original idea.
That's right. Yep. And that's exactly it. So share your gadgets and gears. We have a forum also on the website for that type of thing. self-centering span gauges, the best athletic apparel for what you want to do. I hate sunscreen, so I prefer to wear sun protective clothing and not deal with the sunscreen. Different strokes for different folks. But we've got just a couple other things like that you can find on the website rowing.chat. Check out the sponsors there, or Inspired, and then Rose and Thorn Active Bras, fastermasters.com for training. And then to our producer, Charlotte, her own printing press company, Pierce Press, making authors help share their publishing journey, or helping authors along their publishing journey, excuse me. And then you, Mark, lead correspondent of All American Rowing Camp. Tell the new viewers what you do, real quick.
Real quick, we do rowing camps and coaching education all around the world. So if you're out there on water and you want to have us come to do a camp with you in your location, we'll do that. If you want to come to our location in Florida, that's great. Or if you want to travel with us to Europe, we're doing that too. So look us up.
And next week, we've got Gadgets and Gear Special. So if you got anything that you're trying to figure out how to do better, you need to store your things, you're trying to figure out how to do this or that in rowing and boat transport, it's about regatta time. So it's time to think on that. So that is next week. And that is it for us this week. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys. Great job.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Next week, we have Gadgets and Gear, and we have a special appearance by JL Racing. They have got a new product they're going to showcase next week. So thanks again for your participation.
Tune in next week for that.